The private hangar at Teterboro Airport, New Jersey, glowed under LED lights as crystal champagne flowed freely among the 200 guests. Blake Morrison, 42, CEO of Morrison Capital, circulated through the space with the arrogance of someone who had just added another toy to his collection of luxuries. His $70,000 Italian suit fit his athletic body perfectly, and the Swiss watch on his wrist cost more than most Americans earned in 5 years. "Ladies and gentlemen," Blake announced, his voice echoing through the hangar, "after closing the biggest deal in my company's history, $500 million in a single transaction, I decided to treat myself to something special." He made a dramatic gesture, and an assistant pulled back a red curtain, revealing a gleaming Gulfstream G650 jet. The private aircraft, valued at $70 million, was the ultimate status symbol among the American business elite. "Range of 13,000 kilometers," Blake explained, running his hand over the immaculate fuselage, "top speed close to the speed of sound, and a custom interior that cost another $5 million. It can carry 18 passengers from New York to Tokyo non-stop, flying higher and faster than any commercial jet." The guests, Wall Street executives, Manhattan celebrities, influential politicians, applauded and approached to admire the aircraft. No one noticed the presence of an older man in the back of the hangar. Marcus Washington, 68, with closely cropped gray hair and a grease-stained blue mechanic's jumpsuit, observed the jet with a technical and experienced eye. Marcus wasn't there for the party. He had worked as an aircraft mechanic for 35 years, first in the U.S. Air Force, then as a civilian contractor. That night, he had been called in to check on a minor problem with the hydraulic system of another jet in the adjacent hangar. When he finished, he decided to stop by the main hangar, drawn by the noise of the celebration. "Hey Blake," called Chad Wellington, director of a billion-dollar management company. "Looks like we have a gate crasher here." He pointed at Marcus with his champagne glass, laughing. Blake turned and saw the black mechanic standing a few feet away from the Gulfstream. His face instantly contorted into an expression of disdain and irritation. "Security," Blake called, signaling to 2 security guards in black suits. "We have an unauthorized person in the hangar." Marcus noticed the movement and was already turning to leave when Blake, sensing an opportunity to entertain his guests, raised his hand. "Wait, let him stay," Blake said, a mischievous smile forming. "Come here, sir. Do you like my new toy?" Marcus hesitated, embarrassed by the sudden attention of dozens of rich, elegantly dressed people. He was a discreet man who had spent his life working hard, without drawing attention to himself. "It's a beautiful aircraft, sir," Marcus replied in a calm voice, slowly approaching. His posture was dignified, despite his simple clothes and hands calloused from decades of work. "Beautiful." Blake laughed loudly, joined by a few guests. "It's not just beautiful, my friend. It's a $70 million masterpiece of aeronautical engineering. Something worth more than you would earn in several lifetimes." Marcus's face remained impassive, but his eyes, trained by 35 years of working with aircraft, registered every detail of the Gulfstream with a precision that no one else there noticed. "The angle of attack sensor on the right side appears to be slightly misaligned," Marcus commented quietly, almost to himself. "It probably won't affect performance, but it could cause false readings at high altitude." "What?" Blake approached, pretending he hadn't heard. "What did you just say about my Gulfstream?" Marcus cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the growing attention. "Nothing important, sir. I just noticed a slight misalignment in the angle of attack sensor. The installation team probably didn't notice it during final assembly." Blake's face flushed red. The idea that an old black mechanic in dirty clothes could find faults with his perfect jet was unbearable. Some guests began to murmur, and Blake realized he needed to regain control of the situation. "Well, well," Blake exclaimed loudly and theatrically, spreading his arms wide, "it looks like we have a Gulfstream expert here. Someone who can spot problems just by looking." The guests laughed, some filming with their cell phones. Marcus took a step back, realizing he had made a mistake in speaking up. "I apologize, sir. I didn't mean any offense," he said calmly. "I just have some experience with aircraft." "Experience?" Blake repeated, laughing. "Of course you do. I bet you fly a Gulfstream to work every day, don't you?" More laughter echoed through the hangar. Sarah Chun, the event coordinator and one of the few people who seemed uncomfortable, approached. "Blake, maybe we should get on with the program," she suggested discreetly. But Blake was too excited by his newfound amusement. The champagne and adulation of the guests had gone to his head. "Wait, Sarah. I want to hear more about our friend's aviation experience," Blake insisted, putting an arm around Marcus's shoulders, who remained stiff. "Tell me, sir, what's your name?" "Marcus." "Marcus Washington," the elderly man replied politely. "Mr. Washington, do you think you could fly this jet? It's quite a complex operation, you know. It's not like driving a bus." Marcus's eyes locked with Blake's for a moment. There was something in that gaze that should have served as a warning, a quiet certainty, an unshakable dignity that contrasted with the mockery around him. "Sir, I have over 15,000 flight hours, including combat missions and test flights," Marcus said simply. "Yes, I believe I could fly it." Blake hadn't expected that answer. He had expected to see embarrassment, hesitation, or fear. Marcus's quiet confidence was irritating. That's when the idea came to him, perfect for impressing his guests and putting that meddlesome old man in his place. "Ladies and gentlemen," Blake announced, turning to the crowd with his arms raised. "I just had a brilliant idea. Mr. Washington here believes he can fly my Gulfstream." Blake took the keys from the control panel in his pocket and waved them in the air. "So here's my proposal. If Mr. Washington can complete the startup sequence and start the engines of this jet, just start them, no need to take off, I'll give him the aircraft." "That's right. I'll give him my $70 million Gulfstream if he can start it." There was a moment of shocked silence, followed by laughter and incredulous exclamations. Multiple cell phones began recording. "Blake, are you crazy?" Chad asked between laughs. "What if he succeeds?" "Impossible," Blake replied with excessive confidence. "This model has a highly specific startup procedure. It's not just turning a key. There's a sequence that even experienced pilots get wrong on the first try." Marcus remained silent, watching the scene with a neutral expression. His gaze shifted to Sarah Chun, who seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the turn of events. "Blake, this isn't necessary," she tried to intervene again. "Mr. Washington probably just wants to go home." "Don't be a killjoy, Sarah," Blake replied without taking his eyes off Marcus. "I'm offering our friend the chance of a lifetime. So, Mr. Washington, do you accept the challenge? The jet against nothing, really. You just have to try." Marcus looked at the Gulfstream, then at the people around him, wealthy executives, celebrities, all waiting to laugh at his failure. Humiliation was programmed as part of the evening's entertainment. "I don't need a jet like that, sir," Marcus replied calmly. "Oh, come on. It's not a question of needing it," Blake insisted, moving closer and lowering his voice with feigned cordiality. "It's a Gulfstream, worth $70 million. You could sell it and never work another day in your life." Marcus sighed, realizing Blake wasn't going to let him off the hook easily. Perhaps it would be best to get it over with. "All right," he finally agreed. "I'll give it a try." A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Blake smiled triumphantly, handing Marcus the access key with a theatrical flourish. "Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for. Our friend Marcus is going to try to start up my Gulfstream. If he succeeds, it's his. If he fails, well, at least he'll have a story to tell his grandchildren." The guests gathered around, forming a semicircle around the aircraft. Cell phones were raised to record the moment. Marcus walked slowly to the jet's access ladder, feeling the weight of the mocking glances. As he began to climb, he did something no one expected. Before entering, he ran his hand gently over the fuselage in an almost reverent gesture, like a musician greeting his instrument before a performance. "Look, he's saying goodbye to the jet before he even tries," someone shouted, provoking a wave of laughter. Marcus entered the cabin and settled into the pilot's seat. The door closed with a solid thud, partially muffling the voices and laughter. For a moment, he was alone inside that feat of engineering. Blake approached the cockpit windows, smiling smugly through the glass. "Remember, it's not just a matter of pushing a button. Good luck." Marcus didn't respond. His eyes scanned the instrument panel, the state-of-the-art digital controls, the fly-by-wire systems, the multiple displays. His hands, marked by decades of work, touched the controls with surprising familiarity. Outside, Blake crossed his arms, anticipating the moment when Marcus would attempt the startup unsuccessfully, become embarrassed, and finally give up. Inside the cockpit, Marcus adjusted his seat and checked the instruments with precise, methodical movements. His fingers found the switches and buttons as if he knew them intimately. Blake began to feel slightly uncomfortable with the confident way Marcus was preparing. There was none of the hesitation he had expected to see. "Hey, you don't have to pretend you know what you're doing," Blake shouted, tapping lightly on the window. "Just try it already." Marcus took a deep breath. He began the startup sequence that very few people outside the Gulfstream factory and extremely experienced pilots knew perfectly. Battery master switch activated, followed by APU start, waiting for the correct parameters before proceeding. His fingers danced across the controls in a precise and deliberate sequence. The engines began to come to life with a characteristic growl of Rolls-Royce turbofans. It wasn't a hesitant or uneven startup, it was perfect, textbook perfect, as if the jet itself recognized the hands that commanded it. The smooth, powerful roar of the engines filled the hangar, silencing the crowd instantly. Blake's face changed. The mocking smile gave way to an expression of shock and then panic. He looked around, seeing the equally stunned expressions of the guests. Marcus completed the entire startup sequence, checked all systems, and then shut down the engines with the same precision with which he had started them. He exited the cockpit with the same calmness with which he had entered, descended the stairs, and handed the key back to Blake. "It wasn't luck, Mr. Morrison," Marcus said calmly. "I worked on the G650 development and certification program for 3 years. I was Chief Propulsion Systems Engineer at Gulfstream Aerospace. I helped design and test this specific model." Absolute silence fell over the hangar. Blake paled, realizing the magnitude of his mistake. That's a lie," he stammered, but without conviction. A voice rose from the back of the crowd. "It's not a lie." Everyone turned to see who was speaking. It was James Mitchell, a retired aerospace entrepreneur whom Blake had invited to impress. "Marcus Washington is a legend at Gulfstream," James continued, approaching. "I met him personally at the factory in Savannah 10 years ago. His team revolutionized the G-line propulsion systems. He turned down million-dollar offers from Boeing and Airbus to continue working on projects he believed were important." James addressed Marcus, extending his hand with genuine respect. "Mr. Washington, it's an unexpected honor to meet you here. What brings you to New Jersey?" "I came back a few years ago to care for my ailing mother," Marcus replied simply. "After she passed, I ended up staying. I do maintenance work to keep myself busy and useful. I don't need much to live on." Sarah Chun approached Blake, who looked as if he had seen a ghost. "You just bet your $70 million jet to one of the greatest minds in American aerospace engineering," she whispered incredulously. Blake looked at the key in his hand, then at Marcus, who was talking respectfully with James Mitchell. The humiliation he had planned for the mechanic had backfired in front of all his important guests, executives who controlled billions, crucial business contacts, even a senator who was present. "Wait a moment," Blake said loudly, regaining some of his composure through the arrogance that had always saved him before. "This was clearly a setup. You two know each other. You planned this to make me look foolish in front of my guests." Marcus turned to Blake with a look of deep weariness. "Mr. Morrison, I was just doing my job in the hangar next door when you called me here. I didn't plan anything. I didn't know you'd be here, let alone that you'd have a Gulfstream." "That's true," Sarah Chun confirmed. "Mr. Washington has been working as a contractor for the airport for years. It was a coincidence that he was here today." "Coincidence or not," Blake insisted, his voice trembling with anger and despair, "I was obviously joking about giving away the jet. Everyone realized that, right?" A murmur of disapproval rippled through the crowd. The enchantment of the evening was broken, and now people saw Blake in a very different light. "Actually," said James Mitchell, the respected retired businessman, "you announced your bet very clearly, Blake. We all heard it. And Mr. Washington has fulfilled his part of the agreement." "This is ridiculous," Blake exploded, his face red with anger and humiliation. "I'm not giving up a $70 million jet because of a joke." His voice echoed through the hangar, but now it sounded desperate rather than authoritative. Marcus watched the scene for a moment, then shook his head slightly. "Keep your jet, Mr. Morrison. I have no interest in it." He turned to leave, his dignity intact despite everything. But Blake, still furious and humiliated, couldn't contain himself. "That's right. Go back to your place, fixing broken things. You never belonged in this world anyway." The cruelty in his voice made several guests visibly recoil. Marcus stopped at the hangar door and turned slowly. For the first time, a strong emotion crossed his face, not anger, but a kind of deep pity. "I already belonged to this world, Mr. Morrison. I had the mansion, the luxury cars, the Swiss bank accounts. And I discovered that there are things far more valuable than private jets and fancy parties. Dignity, for example. Peace of mind. True purpose." With these words, Marcus walked toward the exit, leaving behind a stunned Blake and a crowd of guests who now looked at him with completely different eyes, no longer as the successful host of the evening, but as someone who had revealed his true character in the worst possible way. Sarah Chun approached Blake, speaking softly so that only he could hear. "You have two options now. You can let him walk away and completely ruin your reputation in front of all your most important business contacts, including Senator Michaels over there. Or you can do the right thing." Blake looked at the jet key in his hand, at the gleaming aircraft that had been the symbol of his success just half an hour ago, and at the figure of Marcus walking away toward the parking lot. He had imagined this moment, the unveiling of his new Gulfstream, as the pinnacle of his career, the ultimate symbol that he had made it in life. Instead, it had become the moment when everyone saw who he really was inside. The guests watched in absolute silence as Marcus crossed the hangar. The 68-year-old black mechanic, with his grease-stained overalls and calloused hands, walked with more dignity than anyone else in that room full of millionaires and billionaires. Blake stood frozen, holding the key with trembling fingers. He had never been humiliated like this, especially in front of people he considered crucial to his business. Chad Wellington, his longtime friend, approached with a serious expression. "Blake, I've known you for 15 years, Chad said quietly. "You've always been competitive, always wanted to be the best. But this," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "This was cruel. And worse, it was stupid. You bet against a man who literally wrote the operating manual for that jet." "How was I supposed to know?" Blake replied, his voice higher than normal. "He was dressed like any other mechanic." "He is a mechanic," James Mitchell interjected, approaching them. "One of the best aeronautical engineers this country has ever produced. Marcus Washington has 3 Air Force medals for bravery in combat. He has over 20 patents registered in aeronautical systems. Universities offered him professorships. Companies offered him 7-figure salaries. He turned it all down." "Why?" Blake asked, genuinely confused. The idea of someone turning down money and status was incomprehensible to him. Because after his wife died of cancer 10 years ago, he realized he had spent 20 years chasing the wrong things, James explained. "He told me that once. He said he had everything, the mansion in Connecticut, the cars, the prestige, but he was alone in a world of empty people. So he changed. He simplified. He went back to what he really loved, working with his hands, fixing things, helping people." Sarah Chun returned, this time with determination on her face. "Blake, I just spoke to 3 of your biggest clients. They are extremely uncomfortable with what they witnessed. Senator Michaels has already left. He didn't even say goodbye. You need to fix this. Now." Blake looked around the hangar. More than half of the guests had already left discreetly. Those who remained were talking in small groups, casting disapproving glances in his direction. His moment of glory had turned into his worst public nightmare. "What do you want me to do?" Blake asked, arrogance finally giving way to desperation. "I'll go after him," he suddenly decided. I'll apologize." "Apologies aren't enough," Sarah said firmly. "You made a public bet. He won. Technically, legally, that jet is his now. Dozens of people recorded everything." Blake felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. $70 million. His reputation. His pride. All crumbling because of 10 minutes of stupid arrogance. He ran toward the parking lot, his expensive suit suddenly feeling uncomfortable, his watch heavy as a shackle. Marcus was standing next to an old but well-maintained Ford F-150 pickup truck, searching for his keys in his pocket. "Mr. Washington." Blake shouted, running. "Please wait." Marcus stopped and turned, his face showing no anger, only deep exhaustion. "What do you want now, Mr. Morrison? Another chance to humiliate me?" Blake stopped a few feet away, panting. That simple question hit him with unexpected force because that was exactly what he had done. Not out of necessity, not out of self-defense, but for pure cruel entertainment. "No," Blake managed to say. I came to talk about the jet. And to apologize for the way I treated you." "I already told you I don't want your jet," Marcus replied calmly, unlocking the door of his pickup truck. "And as for the apology, I accept it. Now if you'll excuse me, it's late and I have to work early tomorrow." "Mr. Washington, please," Blake insisted, and for the first time in a long time, there was genuine humility in his voice. "Just 5 minutes of your time. Please." Marcus sighed and closed the pickup door again. 5 minutes, he agreed, leaning against the vehicle. "The clock is ticking, Mr. Morrison." Blake looked around, uncomfortable standing in a parking lot at night in his $70,000 suit, talking to a mechanic. But something about Marcus's firm stance made him swallow his pride. "Mr. Washington, let's be practical," Blake began, returning to familiar business territory. "You called my jet, you won the bet. Legally, the aircraft is yours now. I have lawyers, of course, but with all the recordings." "I'm not interested in legal disputes," Marcus interrupted. "I started your jet to show that I'm capable, not to take it." "But you won," Blake insisted, confused by the refusal. "It's worth $70 million. You could sell it tomorrow and never have to work again." Marcus looked at Blake with the same pitying expression he had shown in the hangar. "Mr. Morrison, let me tell you a story. When I was 20, I enlisted in the Air Force. I came from a poor family in Detroit. My father worked at a Ford factory for 40 years and died at 58 of a heart attack, without ever having taken a real vacation." Blake was silent, for the first time really listening. "I swore I'd be different," Marcus continued. "I worked hard, studied engineering at night, climbed the career ladder. By the time I was 35, I had it all: the mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, 3 imported cars, a 7-figure bank account. Married to a beautiful woman, Jennifer. I thought I had it made." Marcus paused, his eyes going distant. "Then Jennifer was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Stage 4. The doctors gave her 6 months. You know what I discovered, Mr. Morrison? All that money, all that property, was worth nothing. It couldn't buy me one more day with her. It couldn't give me back the nights I spent at the office instead of at home. It couldn't bring back the birthdays I missed because I was traveling for work." Blake felt a tightness in his chest. "She lived 2 years after the diagnosis," Marcus said. 2 years in which I gave up everything, the important projects, the promotions, the money, and just stayed by her side. They were the best 2 years of my life, even with all the pain. Because I finally understood what mattered." "I'm sorry for your loss," Blake murmured, and for the first time in years, it was genuine empathy, not just empty words. Marcus nodded his thanks. "After she was gone, I sold everything. The mansion, the cars, even my shares in the company. I donated half to cancer research. With the other half, I bought a simple house in Newark, invested conservatively, and went back to doing what I've always loved, working with airplanes, with my hands, creating and fixing things." "But why work as a mechanic?" Blake asked. "With your experience, you could be a consultant, make millions." Marcus smiled. "Because by fixing things, I help people. Every week, I work for free for the veterans program at the airport, maintaining the aircraft that take wounded soldiers for treatment. That has meaning, Mr. Morrison. Your $70 million jet? It's just metal and carbon fiber. It has no soul, no purpose other than to take rich people from one place to another." Blake was silent, processing those words. His entire life had been built around accumulating wealth and status symbols. The idea of someone deliberately choosing less when they could have more was deeply unsettling. "The bus I'm taking home," Marcus said, glancing at his watch, "will drop me off 3 blocks from my house. I'll walk those 3 blocks, greet my neighbors who will be sitting on their porches despite the cold. Mrs. Martinez will offer me coffee. Mr. Thompson will want me to look at his car engine tomorrow. That's wealth, Mr. Morrison. Community. Connection. Purpose." "I never," Blake began, but couldn't finish the sentence. Never what? Never thought that way? Never had that? Never knew there was another way to live? Mr. Morrison, Marcus said gently, you can keep your jet. But I'll give you some free advice, something I learned too late. All the money in the world won't fill the void I see in your eyes. That hangar was full of people, but I bet you feel deeply alone. The words hit Blake like a punch. He thought of his empty apartment in Manhattan, his friends who only showed up when there was champagne and business, his 3 ex-wives who had left taking half his fortune but no fond memories. How did you know? Blake asked, his voice weak. Because I used to be you, Marcus replied. And I almost died being you. It took losing everything that really mattered for me to wake up. Blake felt something break inside him, not anger or frustration, but something deeper. For the first time in decades, he felt tears burn his eyes. I don't know how to be different, he admitted. This is all I know. Compete. Win. Accumulate. Then learn, Marcus said simply. You're still young. You have time. He paused. Want to know what I would do if I were you? Blake nodded, unable to speak. I'd sell that jet, Marcus said. $70 million can change a lot of lives. There's a children's hospital in Newark treating kids with cancer from families who can't afford treatment. There are veterans programs without funding. There are schools in poor communities in need of equipment. You want me to donate $70 million? Blake asked incredulously. I don't want you to donate anything, Marcus corrected. I want you to invest. In people. In purpose. In something that will let you sleep at night without needing pills or expensive whiskey. But the choice is yours, Mr. Morrison. It always has been. Marcus opened the truck door again. My 5 minutes are up. I have to go. Wait, Blake said quickly. Would you help me? Teach me? How to do this? Marcus studied him for a long moment. Why? Why would I help the man who tried to publicly humiliate me less than an hour ago? Blake swallowed hard. Because I need to change. And I don't know how to do it on my own. And you're the first person in years who's told me the truth instead of just agreeing with me to get something. Marcus closed the truck door again and leaned against it, arms crossed. If I agree to help you, and I haven't agreed yet, you're going to have to do something for me first. Anything, Blake said quickly. Tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, you go to St. Barnabas Hospital in Newark, Marcus instructed. To the pediatric oncology ward. You're going to meet a kid named Deshaun, age 8, leukemia. You won't mention money, you won't promise anything. You'll just sit with him for an hour and listen to his story. After that, call me. If you still want help, we'll talk. Why? Blake asked. Because I need to know if you really want to change or if you're just afraid of losing money and reputation, Marcus replied honestly. Deshaun can't give you anything. He can't improve your image. He can't make you a profitable business. If you show up tomorrow at 6 in the morning just to sit with a sick child, then maybe there's hope for you. Marcus handed him a card with his phone number. If you don't show up, no problem. You go back to your life, I go back to mine, and we never see each other again. But if you show up, he paused. If you show up, maybe we can work together on something that really matters. With that, Marcus got into his pickup truck and drove away, leaving Blake alone in the parking lot, holding a simple card with a phone number, feeling simultaneously lost and strangely hopeful for the first time in years. Blake Morrison didn't sleep that night. He sat on the balcony of his Manhattan penthouse apartment, watching the city that never sleeps, thinking about his conversation with Marcus. At 5 in the morning he showered, put on jeans and a simple shirt, for the first time in years, no suit, and drove to Newark. St. Barnabas Hospital was an old but well-maintained building. Blake parked and walked to the reception desk, feeling completely out of his element. I'm here to visit Deshaun, he told the nurse. Pediatric oncology ward. The nurse studied him for a moment, a rich white man, clearly out of place, but something in his expression made her smile kindly. Room 304. He's awake. He always wakes up early. Blake climbed to the 3rd floor, his heart pounding. When he found room 304, he paused at the door. Inside, an 8-year-old black boy sat on his bed, completely bald from chemotherapy, playing video games on an old console. Hi, Blake said hesitantly. Deshawn looked up, surprised. Are you a friend of Mr. Marcus? Something like that, Blake replied. Can I come in? Sure. Deshawn smiled, and Blake was struck by how much joy there was in that smile, despite everything. Blake sat down in the chair next to the bed and for the first time in decades, just listened. Deshawn told him about his favorite game, about how he wanted to be a pilot when he grew up, about the stories Mr. Marcus told him about airplanes. He didn't mention his illness, he didn't complain, he just spoke with the pure enthusiasm of a child. Mr. Marcus says I'm going to get better and he's going to take me to see real airplanes, Deshawn said, his eyes shining. Do you think that's true? Blake felt a lump in his throat. Yes, I think it's true, he replied, and for the first time, he wasn't lying to please someone. He really wanted it to be true. When Blake left the hospital 2 hours later, not 1 hour but 2, because Deshawn was fascinating and Blake had completely lost track of time, he called Marcus. I went, he said simply. And you were right. About everything. In the months that followed, Blake Morrison underwent a transformation that shocked everyone who knew him. He sold the Gulfstream for $68 million, a little below market value, but the buyer agreed to include an additional donation. He used the money to create the Washington Foundation for Children, in honor of Marcus's wife, Jennifer. Deshawn's treatment was the first paid for by the foundation, an experimental treatment in Switzerland that cost $2 million. Marcus accompanied him every step of the way, not as an employee or consultant, but as a mentor and gradually, as a friend. Blake sold his penthouse apartment and bought a comfortable but modest house in Newark, near the hospital. He began spending 3 mornings a week visiting children in the oncology ward. Not as a millionaire doing charity work, but as someone who genuinely cared. His company underwent a complete restructuring. 30% of the shares were distributed to employees. Another 30% went to the foundation. Blake implemented fair salaries, real benefits, and work-life balance policies. Some of his former friends abandoned him, calling him crazy. But new relationships emerged, real ones, based on mutual respect and shared values. Sarah Chun, the events coordinator, became the foundation's executive director. James Mitchell, the retired businessman, joined the board. 6 months after that night in the hangar, Blake was at St. Barnabas Hospital when the doctors broke the news. Deshawn was in complete remission. The boy, now with his hair growing back, jumped into Blake's arms, laughing. Marcus watched from the doorway, a proud smile on his face. Mr. Marcus. Deshawn shouted. Can I go see the planes now? Yes, you can, champ, Marcus replied. In fact, I have a surprise for you. The following weekend, Marcus, Blake, and Deshawn went to the airport. But not just to see airplanes. Marcus had arranged for Deshawn to sit in the cockpit of a small Cessna, and under careful supervision, even help fly it for a few minutes on the ground. Deshawn's face was pure joy. Blake took pictures, not to post on social media, but to keep, to remember why everything had changed. You did a good thing, Marcus said to Blake as they watched Deshawn explore the cockpit. No, Blake corrected. You showed me how to do good things. I was just willing to learn. A year after the incident in the hangar, the Washington Foundation for Children had treated 23 children with cancer, all from low-income families. Deshawn, completely cured, visited the hospital regularly, bringing hope to other children undergoing treatment. Blake also created an aeronautical engineering scholarship program for black students from underprivileged communities, named the Marcus Washington Program, despite Marcus's modest protests. It's important, Blake had insisted. Kids need to see that people like you exist, that these paths are possible. At the opening ceremony for the new pediatric treatment center that the foundation had funded, Blake was invited to speak. He took the stage, no longer the arrogant executive of a year ago, but someone visibly transformed. A year ago, he began, I owned a $70 million jet. I thought that made me successful. I thought accumulating wealth was the goal of life. Then I met a man who taught me that I was completely wrong. He looked at Marcus in the audience. Marcus Washington showed me that true success isn't measured by how much you have, but by how much you give. Not by how much you accumulate, but by how many lives you touch positively. Blake paused, moved. That jet is sold. The money helped build this center. But more importantly, That night I tried to humiliate Mr. Washington, forced me to look in the mirror and not like what I saw. It was the best gift anyone ever gave me, the brutal truth about who I was and the opportunity to become someone better. Deshawn, sitting in the front row next to Marcus, applauded enthusiastically. Blake smiled at him. This incredible boy taught me that joy doesn't depend on circumstances. Marcus taught me that purpose is worth more than profit. And together, they saved my life as much as we saved Deshawn's life. After the ceremony, Blake and Marcus walked through the halls of the new center. "You've really changed," Marcus observed. "I don't pretend to recognize the man from that night in the hangar anymore." "That man died," Blake replied simply. "And it's good that he did. He was miserable and didn't even know it." They stopped in front of a plaque on the wall, Jennifer Washington Pediatric Oncology Center. "Thank you for letting me honor her this way," Blake said. Marcus put his hand on Blake's shoulder. "She would have liked you. The new version, I mean. The old one, she would have seen through the facade immediately." Blake laughed, a genuine sound. "She sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Marcus confirmed. "And she taught me something that I now pass on to you. It doesn't matter where you started, it matters where you end up. It doesn't matter who you were, it matters who you choose to be." That night, Blake returned to his modest home in Newark. No longer to an empty penthouse apartment, but to a community dinner he hosted weekly for neighbors, foundation staff, and families of children undergoing treatment. Marcus was there, of course, as were Deshawn and his mother. Sarah Chun brought dessert. James Mitchell told stories of the old aeronautics industry. It was noisy, chaotic, and completely imperfect. It was real. It was family. It was life. Before going to sleep, Blake looked out the window of his bedroom. He no longer saw the Manhattan skyline from a luxury penthouse. He saw the simple lights of Newark, listening to the laughter of neighbors on their balconies. And for the first time in his adult life, he felt genuinely rich. "I'll give you my jet if you can take off," he had mocked a year ago. He didn't know that he would lose much more than a jet that night. He would lose his arrogance, his emptiness, his loneliness. And in return, he would gain something that no fortune could buy: purpose, community, peace. And a friend who was worth more than all the jets in the world.